So good evening and welcome to Digital Graphics 2018. Your host here, Mr. Jones. Right. So today we're starting with Blender. That is an open source, free 3D modeling and animating studio. You can do quite a bit of things with Blender. Build games, model, create textures, edit videos. It has a lot of capabilities, and that's really cool for free software. So the latest version we have here is 2.79. You can easily download that off the blender.org website. Here, it's actually going through development of 2.8 right now, but you can always download the latest version here. Comes pretty good. It has versions for Windows, Linux, and Mac, and you can always check out other versions. So if you have a different software, you can always check what it has. It even has a Steam installer, which is pretty cool. And if you are a developer, you can always play with the source code to create whatever you want out of it. All right, it's fully featured, whether you be animator, modeler, VFX, game developer, 3D printing, you name it, Blender's got you covered. Right, so it's really good for 3D, and even if you're an animator, example, if you're doing 2D animations, Blender actually supports 2D animations as well as 3D animations, which is pretty exciting for free software. All right, so let's start. So I've opened up Blender. By default, Blender has a few settings. One of the things that I usually like checking, first of all, because I'm not sure if everybody has a 3-button mouse. Blender uses a 3-button mouse. But in the case, let's say you have a laptop and your laptop only has, example, 2 buttons, left and right click. You can go to File, User Preferences, and from User Preferences, let's choose Input. Now, input allows me to emulate a 3-button mouse. This is really good in the case that I don't have a 3rd-button mouse, or if my laptop only has 2 buttons. To simulate a 3-button mouse, which is used for navigation and pivoting and rotating around the screen, you just emulate that. If you simply highlight it, it's going to tell you what that does, which is emulates the middle mouse button when you press Alt and you click the mouse. And then also I like to enable continuous grab. And continuous grab allows me to, when I'm scaling, it goes beyond the screen limit so that I can scale theoretically forever. Right? There are other things you can always play around with. Blender also uses numpad heavily for moving around in navigation, such as looking at the top view, left view, right view, etc. If, for instance, your machine doesn't have a numpad, if your laptop doesn't have a numpad, then you can emulate numpad by clicking emulate numpad. If you already have a numpad, then you're good, right? You also have different types of orbit styles. That's how you navigate around the scene. And if you want to view navigation, you have walk and fly. Walking actually allows you to walk around a scene and jump and even, teleport. But you can also choose fly, which allows you to just fly around the scene. And you can enable gravity if you want. And all right, so that's one part. Blender also comes with add-ons. So by default, not every single feature is on, but the necessities are usually on. But if there are additional things you want to enable, you have the official stuff, which deals with like views and animation, etc. You also have the community-based add-ons. You also have testing add-ons, which, well, there's none right now because I haven't installed any. But besides that, you also have your categories that you can go into, whether it's about user or the enabled ones you want to see. They are there. You have the disabled ones, which tend to be, depending on which one you're in, official or community, it shows you the different ones. So you have different stuff for different things, game engine, etc. Import, export. I'm going to hold shift and click both of them so I can have both selected. You can click either one, or if you hold shift, you can actually enable both or even all three. Besides that, now you have themes. Blender comes with some preset themes. Essentially, the interface is completely customizable, so that if, for instance, you want to change the color of certain things, example, user interface, let's say I want to change the color of my text to something else, right? And you want to change a few things in just user interface, you can play around with it. Let's see, if we look in tools, maybe I'll see some differences, outlines perhaps, right? You can see the outlines around my border changing colors there. And essentially, you are free to manipulate things as you see fit. There's quite a bit of stuff there, so it categorizes everything. You can change the color of almost every single thing, right? But Blender also comes with your presets. So I'm going to stick with my presets. Uh, example, let's say you wanted to use a default plus plus. It actually has customized look. If you want to do one in this kind of view, you can see it. Or if you want to change the hexagon, or if you want to change to any other thing, right, you can always do that. If for any reason you want to go back to your default, I mean, you have reset the default theme, right, and you get that back there. And if for any reason you want to go back to factory settings, you can always click File and choose Load Factory Settings. It goes back to the very beginner settings. One more thing besides that, inside my user preferences, you have File. So normally in Blender, these will all be blank, or most of them except temp. But for example, I know my fonts are located in Windows folder for fonts. So rather than me actually importing fonts every time, I just have my fonts already loaded by the system default file paths. So that if I want to access a font, I can just see it. Right? Rather than, every time I start a new project and I want to type in some text, I have to navigate to the fonts folder. There's that too. And also one thing, most important, especially for those who are going to be using, if you have a graphics card, that is, Blender by default will pick up your graphics card. Depending on the machine you have, sometimes there are issues with certain of them, but lately, as I've seen, Blender will pick up your graphics card, and you can actually set up that you compute with your graphics card rather than your internal CPU. So with that enabled, whenever it's rendering, it's going to be using, for now, I have a CUDA Quadro M2000M for my graphics card, so I can actually work with that and do that. Once you're satisfied, simply press Save User Settings, and whenever you open Blender, those are the settings you're going to get. Right? That includes the size of this view, that includes where this is located and whatever view you're in. So if I were to just pull this over some more, just to get rid of that bar, I can choose File, User Preferences. And I'm going to choose I'm going to choose something. I'm going to turn on my screencast keys because by default, those aren't on. So I'm going to install add-on from file. By default, I don't really have screencast keys. I actually had to download it off the Blender website. And the reason why I'm turning on the screencast keys is so that whenever I press a button, because Blender is actually very shortcut oriented, not difficult in the sense that you have to remember everything, but you can navigate around Blender using some relatively easy shortcuts. So I'm going to turn on my screencast keys. So I'm going to install add-on from file, and it's going to ask me, hey, do you have screencast keys? I'm going to turn that on here, screencast keys. Just click that on, and it tells you what it does, and you can even choose to remove it, but I'll stick with that. I'm going to choose Save User Preferences, and one more thing, I'm going to open it up. So there is a plus sign here that allows me to access additional options, such as my transform tools, as well as some view tools and others. And I'll just turn on my screencast keys. Right, screencast keys allows me to show my shortcuts while I'm working so that you won't get lost if I suddenly jump to shortcuts. Right? So here's what I want you to do with me. And I'll just move this back by simply clicking and dragging this all the way back over. You can close that. The shortcut is N. N is the shortcut to bring up that particular window. And over here you have another set of shortcuts for your tools and all those other things. T is a shortcut for that. So if you toggle T, you can bring up your tools over here. Now tools come in different categories. You have your transform tools, etc., editing and such. You have things that you can use to create. You can create relationships, do an animation, do physics, use the grease pencil, or, well, you would normally see this one, but because I've installed a plugin for Make Human, which is another free software to build people, you can actually see additional tools there. I'll stick with this stuff here. And the first exercise we'll do is just navigating around our cube here. So if you just press the middle mouse wheel button, for those of you who don't have middle mouse wheel button, if you've enabled the emulate 3-button mouse, you can hold Alt and click and just navigate around the cube. Just get familiar with it. Navigating from top to bottom. Take it slow. That way you're not going to be moving too fast. Right, so just navigating around the scene allows you to just move around the scene. And while I'm moving around the scene, you'll notice quite a few things moving along with me. If you look at the bottom here, you have a grid that tells you where your grid space is. Your grid space allows you to know where 0, 0, 0 is in your space. Because normally if you're doing 2D animation, you have X and Y values. But in 3D, you have X, Y, and Z. That's what they call it, 3 dimensions. Another thing you'll notice is that you have a camera here, this little triangular looking object. If you should right click on it, and most people aren't used to right clicking the first time. Right clicking is how you select objects in Blender. So if you right click, you'll be able to select your camera. And this other one here, if you right click here, is your lamp. And you will notice as I right click, right, you're going to start seeing things moving over here. This is your organizer, your outliner window, right? This window right here, your outliner, allows you to see what is in your current scene, and you can set it so that it views more than just scenes, whether it be all scenes or active scenes, group sequences, etc. Right, so we have currently a camera, a cube, and a lamp. If for any reason you want to change the name of any of your objects, right, double click lamp. Let's say I want to call this sun, tick, in, and that's my lamp. Let's say I want to call this cube box, and I have camera here, and I can just call it camera, and it's just a camera, right? That's what's there. Now the reason why inside Blender you need all these, this is your basic setup. The reason why this is important is because essentially when you're thinking 3D space, you're thinking real world. Essentially, if you're going to see anything in 3D, you need two things. You need a light source, so you can actually see anything, and you need eyes. And the cameras function like eyes. Right? So if you want to see what exactly this thing is seeing, or what your camera is seeing, simply press 0 on your numpad. If you don't have a numpad per se, right? Remember you are able to enable your emulate numpad inside the user preferences. What you can do instead is you can go to view, and you have cameras here, right? It says active camera. So if you hit that, it's gonna view based on your active camera, which is pretty much the only camera we have in the scene. And this is the current view you have of your object. Now if you press F12 or choose to render image, which is F12, what it'll do is it'll render out your image. So this is exactly what you get when you start up Blender. If you press F12, that's what you will see. Right, so that's the cube that you have, right? And that's like a very short intro to just navigating around the scene. So if you want to navigate, it's middle mouse wheel. If for instance you want to pan across the scene, hold shift while middle mouse wheel clicking, and you can pan. If you want to zoom in, right, you can just scroll wheel in, scroll wheel out. And if you want to focus on a selected object, simply select the object, like right click and press numpad period or numpad full stop. If you, like I said, if you don't have those options, you can always go to view, and you will see the shortcuts here, right? Different views and navigations and alignments and such. here we go. View selected, numpad, full stop. And we'll just zoom into that. You know, we just scroll out and navigate. So that's just navigating around the scene, navigating in general, making sure everything is okay. And just try by selecting again just to get practice. Select the camera, select the lamp, select the cube, and just make sure you have that navigation stuff down pat. All right, so I'm going to wrap up this particular section of the video, and then we can move on to actually editing the objects in our scene. Thank you.